Hey there, think of me as your personal, highly caffeinated literature tutor. We're putting together the ultimate visual study guide for Afro-Asian short story analysis today. If you've got a huge literature exam coming up, honestly, just take a deep breath, drop your shoulders a bit, and get ready. Because by the end of this explainer, you are going to absolutely crush it. We're going to break down the mechanics of storytelling so clearly that you will literally never look at a folktale the exact same way again.
Here's our super quick study syllabus for today. We'll cover the 6 parts of plot, internal versus external conflict, identifying point of view, cultural values, and filial piety, and then wrap up with a final exam practice quiz. Let's get right into it.
All right, part 1, the 6 parts of plot.
Okay, let's dive into this. Plot is basically the foundational skeleton of any story you read, right? Unlike a massive, sprawling novel, a short story author is arranging a highly specific sequence of events designed to hit you hard, usually in just one focused sitting. So, when you sit down with your exam text, your very first job is to identify how that skeleton is built. Are you looking at a linear plot or a parallel plot? A linear plot is super straightforward. It moves strictly in chronological order, from the very beginning straight through to the end. It's like driving down a single, straight highway. But a parallel plot? That's more like intersecting train tracks. You've got 2 or more completely separate storylines, maybe following different characters or happening in totally different settings, running alongside each other until they eventually connect. A linear plot basically follows a pyramid shape. When you read a linear story, you're essentially climbing a mountain and then hiking back down. You start way down at the flat base, slowly trek up the steep incline as things get harder and harder, hit the snowy peak, and then quickly descend to base camp on the other side. So let's actually map out that hike step by step for your exam. Step 1 is the exposition. This is where we just hang out, meet the characters, get a feel for the setting. Step 2, the inciting incident. This is absolutely crucial. It's the single tiny spark that creates the whole problem of the story. Step 3 is rising action, where the tension builds and things get really complicated. Then, Step 4, the climax. Now really pay attention here because the climax isn't just a random explosion, it's a threefold phenomenon. The main character gets new information, they accept it, and they are forced to act on it. Step 5 is the falling action, where the dust starts to settle. And finally, Step 6 is the resolution, where the final outcome is decided. If you can map out these 6 steps, I promise you can conquer literally any folktale they hand you.
Moving right along to Section 2, internal versus external conflict. Listen, if the plot is the skeleton of the story, then conflict is the driving engine that ties the whole shebang together. Without it, there's no story. It's just a boring list of things happening. As an active reader, you need to categorize the struggles your protagonist is facing. Broadly speaking, we have internal and external conflicts. Internal is character versus self. This struggle is happening entirely within the character's own mind. Think of it like battling their own fears or wrestling with a really tough decision. Then we have external conflicts, where the character is fighting outside forces. This could be character versus character, like your classic hero fighting a villain. It could be character versus society, where they're fighting corrupt laws or super restrictive traditions. Or it could be character versus nature, like trying to survive a brutal typhoon or, a wild animal attack in the woods.
So the crucial point here is that the type of conflict directly dictates the resolution of your story. If your main character is dealing with a character versus self conflict, the resolution usually requires them to change themselves internally, right? They have to overcome that inner demon or completely shift their perspective. But if it's a character versus society conflict, the resolution usually involves the character trying to change the world around them by challenging the customs of their community.
Now, in Afro-Asian literature, there's one very specific cultural value that acts as a massive internal conflict generator, and that is filial piety. This is the deeply rooted value of honoring, respecting, and caring for your parents, your elders, and your ancestors. On your exam, when you see a character suddenly forced to weigh their own personal survival or their own desires against their deep-rooted devotion to their family, boom, you are looking at a classic, incredibly powerful internal conflict driven by filial piety.
All right, Section 3, identifying point of view or POV. Okay, so we know the plot, we know the conflict. Now we need to understand the lens through which we are viewing these struggles. Remember, the narrator shapes absolutely everything we know and feel as readers. Here is a huge, highly actionable study tip for you. When the exam starts, look at the very first paragraph of the story and literally underline the pronouns. If you see I, me, or we, you're in first person. If you see you, which is pretty rare but it does happen, that's second person. If you see he, she, or they, you're in third person. From there, just ask yourself, does this outside narrator only know the thoughts of one single character? If yes, that's third person limited. Do they know everyone's secrets and thoughts? Then that's third person omniscient.
The reason this matters so much is because it completely changes your reading experience. First-person POV is intimate, but it's restricted. You're basically trapped inside the protagonist's head. You only know what they know. If they get tricked, well, you get tricked too. Third-person POV, especially omniscient, is more of a bird's-eye view. The narrator is an outside voice describing the action, and sometimes they reveal dramatic irony, like we actually know a trap is waiting for the hero way before the hero does.
Let's see how this actually builds tension. We all know the classic story of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, which is traditionally told in a third-person POV. But what if we rewrote it? I approached the large rock after the thieves had left and said, "Open sesame." The cave opened and I entered it. By shifting it to the first person, suddenly the reader feels that immediate, heart-pounding danger. The greed, the fear. It all becomes incredibly personal, doesn't it?
Which brings us to Section 4, Cultural Values and Filial Piety.
Let's connect all these mechanics of plot and conflict right back to the cultural heartbeat of these texts. In Afro-Asian literature, communal identity is fiercely expressed through the narrative. Take two very famous stories you might actually see on your exam. The Chinese legend, The Soul of the Great Bell, involves an ultimate, incredibly tragic sacrifice for family honor. Meanwhile, the Japanese folktale, The Aged Mother, explores a son's life-saving devotion to his elderly parent, pushing back against a cruel law. Think about that. They are completely distinct stories from different nations, featuring entirely different plots, yet they both utilize the exact same foundational communal value, filial piety, to drive their characters' decisions.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how cultural traditions aren't just, pretty background details. They are the actual blueprint for the entire plot resolution. Watch this flow. The cultural value establishes the character's duty right in the exposition. Then the inciting incident threatens that exact duty. This forces an agonizing internal conflict, usually personal survival weighed against family duty. And ultimately, the cultural value of filial piety dictates the choice the character makes at the climax. The culture literally builds the story.
Okay, home stretch. Section 5, Final Exam Practice Quiz.
You have done incredible work absorbing all of this structural analysis today. I know it's a lot to take in, but you have the tools now. So let's validate that hard work with a quick, supportive knowledge check just to make sure your brain is perfectly primed for exam day. Question 1. What do we call the turning point and highest point of tension in a story? Take a second, visualize that linear plot diagram, think about the snowy peak of that story mountain we mapped out earlier. Got it?
The answer is the climax. Excellent job if you got that one. Remember, it's the peak of the mountain, but it is also where the character receives new information, accepts it, and makes that absolutely crucial threefold choice.
All right, let's try question 2. What specific type of third-person POV features a narrator who knows the thoughts and feelings of all characters? Think back to our pronoun checklist. They're using he or she or they, but they have a very special, kind of godlike access to the entire story.
And the answer is third-person omniscient. Yes, nailed it. You now have the exact analytical tools you need to actively break down the skeleton, the engine, and the lens of literally any story you face on your upcoming exam.
I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to ponder, maybe even as a practice essay prompt. How does the literature you read reflect the history and deep-rooted culture of its people? As you walk into your test, don't just read the words on the page. Look for those cultural footprints. Look for the filial piety. Look for exactly how society shapes the climax. I am wishing you the absolute best of luck on your exam. You are going to do amazing. Keep learning and keep analyzing.